Yeah, here we go. We are live. Great day, everyone. Welcome to another incredible episode of the Jim Gale Show. I'm extremely excited about today. It's going to be a fantastic one. But first, as always, Jim, my friend, great to see you, buddy. How are you today? And you got some action going on around Kissimmee, Florida, huh?
Yeah, oh man. It's and I just heard of another train derailment in Michigan.
Yeah,
And
Detroit.
what I haven't studied is how many trains derail a year in a significant way. And I know it's a big number, right? So, we know how the reticular activating system in the brain works. When you start focusing on something, then all of a sudden that something expands and so on. However, we do know that the statistics on the food supply chain being destroyed are statistically significant to the max. Like, we're at war, and the food supply chain is a big piece of this war. So anyway, without getting too far down that rabbit hole, without introducing our most incredible guest that I had an amazing time with this past week, I'm so darn excited to be with Brigadier General Blain Holt. And Blain, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Listen, it's just great to be with you, Jim, and Matt, and to pipe up a conversation that we started the other day. I think it was fun that you and I were back-to-back speakers at an event, and I listened to your speech, and then you listened to mine, and it was like, uh-oh, we really are way behind in meeting each other. But it's great to be with you both and get started down a journey that I know we've got a lot to create and build.
No, we sure do. The alignment. I mean, a lot of people, I talk a lot about consciousness and centering oneself. And when you talk to me about Hawkins' book and David Hawkins' Power versus Force, I was just like, oh my God, a general in the governmente that is also conscious. And that was when, even before that, when you started talking freely about what was happening in the world, is when I was so attracted. And then when you add on your ability to strategize and your use of humor and joy and good communication skills, you nailed it. We've got a lot of work to do.
We do. And, to your point, I spent 30 years in my Air Force career learning how to blow stuff up and break things. And now I'm spending the next 30 years of my life learning how to create and build things. And that's kind of how I look at it. And both have select skills with them that feed off of each other. But what I have learned with a warrior's ethos over many years is that vibration, frequency, energy management, these are all tools that we use to be effective in what we do. And when we say a warrior's ethos, that can be in everyday life. It doesn't have to mean, oh, here I go, I'm going off to war. It could mean, this is my situation, I'm going to be very serious, but at the same time, I'm going to play, I'm going to bring others with me, we're going to have a lot of fun, but we're all going towards a goal and a purpose.
Oh, that's so well said. And also, I was with Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers today. Dr. Chambers is a Green Beret, and he said something that you know very well. He was speaking from the military mindset, and love is the foundation of the warrior. Because we are fighting for freedom and for country and for family and for friends and community. Now, that's where it can get twisted, right?
It absolutely can. We find this on the battlefield that when you raise your hand, you come out of tech school or basic training and you're getting your gun and now you're going off to war. You might have said things around you that sounded appropriate, like, I raised my hand, this is for God and country. I see what the framers had in mind, but war is not like that. And when you get into a very tight pinch or a hard combat situation, a hard flying situation, in my case, you're really looking at those people that you're serving with to your left and your right, and you love them, and you want to see you all get out of this thing okay and intact. And that's what will help you survive, help you manage that mentality, that psychology. Very quickly, the thoughts of God and country will start to kind of be in a different place in your mind, although an appropriate place. but it's really that humanity around you that you're bound to go, look, I've put my life in your hands and you're putting your life in mine. And that's how we're going to get through this. And then to bring God back front and center stage, you know that's who's got your ultimate back. But it wouldn't happen without the love being involved in all of that.
Wow. And so from your experience, now you're retired. Are you able to share a little bit about your process, going through the ranks, rising up in the ranks, and then a little bit about why you retired?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I would advise most people who want to have a military career to do not try to replicate mine, because you would have to be involved with a great measure of luck. I came into the military through the ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Corps program at the University of Georgia. And the only reason I went to college and the only reason I went through ROTC was because the Air Force had a requirement to do those things if you were going to take a crack at going to pilot training and flying. It's really all I cared about. And then as I grew, I became an officer and I started really seeing the big system, the big hierarchy, and where my place was in it. But I've got this kind of irreplaceable gene in my DNA code, which is challenge everything. My nickname over many years has become the irascible. And it's not that I'm an angry person. It's more that the status quo always disappoints me. I want to better things. I want to change things. And so that gets to an officer who, through his 27 years of active service, was constantly challenging the status quo in all directions, up and down the ranks. And I developed kind of this maverick, kind of maybe that Holt guy's the big mouth. He's always not satisfied with what's going on. But it served me well because it also lends itself to the leadership traits that I would pick up along the way, try to inspire others, try to grab other folks' ideas and promote them and promote the people, and then start to come to a cultural a set of ingredients that I find extremely important to any organization. And that is humble, hungry, and hustle. Those things have to be a part of your warrior's toolkit, whether you're in the military or not. And in my upbringing, I had certain officers along the way, General Breedlove, General McNabb, General Petraeus, who always saw kind of, the best and brought it out of what I had to give. And then they kind of protected me when the status quo folks wanted to squash me. And so that's why I would say I always have a healthy level of skepticism, but I always find in any bureaucracy that you sit in, there's entrepreneurs on the outside, but there's entrepreneurs. And that's where I started my career of creation. And really, I get to a place called Kyrgyzstan, Jim. You and I talked about that. And I was the wing commander there at a time when the corrupt regime trying to evict the base. But President Obama and General McChrystal have other ideas, like triple the capacity of the base, and we're going to have a surge in Afghanistan. And that sets the stage for a year that's going to absolutely change my life and the way I look at everything.
Wow. So tell us about that year.
So it's really quite funny. I was rumored here I was in a place I call affectionately Spokanistan. I now live in Coeur d'Alene, just nearby there. But I'm the vice commander at a base, and I wasn't supposed to leave for another year. It was heavily rumored that I'm going to take command of Charleston Air Force Base, a wing that I had served at many times. And then the 4-star calls me up and he goes, "Nope, you're going to Central Asia. You're going to Kyrgyzstan. You're going to have 1 year running that combat logistics wing in Central Asia. And by the way, the news is not encouraging. We think that they're going to try to evict the base, but this is yours and you got to go." And my mindset going in, and this is why I call this assignment my Saul to Paul conversion,
Wow.
is I go there with this mentality of, this wing needs to be prepared for an increased military mission. I need my refuelers overhead the skies of Afghanistan to be better at what they do. I need the cargo to move more efficiently. I need the people to move more efficiently. I'm going to work on that and give them a real warrior's mindset on that. I get there, and within 2 weeks, I find out the Kyrgyz people really hate our guts. All the money we're giving is going into this corrupt regime. They are really serious about trying to evict us. And it's an ugly American kind of scenario. And so I kind of hand all the mission responsibilities over to my very able colonels, which I should have done immediately. And then I go outside the front gate. I learn Kyrgyz. I understand what the needs of the society are. I start making friends in every walk of life that I can, from the universities to women's group who want to get into business formation. I start building schools with my team. And we really start kind of changing this cocktail that was the ill-fated Kyrgyz-US relationship. And I found a people so warm and friendly and effusive, so wanting to be a part of what you're doing, that every little opportunity we got just blossomed into another opportunity. And honestly, Jim, it gets to where you're at right now. A lot of it centers and focuses around agriculture, which is, they were just wanting to sell us a lot of their agriculture. And we have these crazy laws in the military. You have to buy American. But when you think of the culture involved, the Kyrgyz people, in the United States, if you said, what's the best thing you guys do? You might hold up an iPhone or a computer or some Tesla and go, look at that. That's us. But they would hold up the world's most perfect apple, and they would to even call it an apple because it's so good. And so we started to change that and really bring them into our mission and what we were doing. And it gets to this bloody, violent revolution about 9 months into my tour, with massacres, having to put the country back together again and get it back up to mission status. And this creates relationships and thought patterns and ideas for me that are with me to this day. In fact, it's like I left Kyrgyzstan about an hour and a half ago.
Wow. You pointed to one of the insanities that can come from governmente, and that is you would have to import food instead of that. That is mind-blowing. I understand how the policy could have come to be, but so you made a change there.
We did. It was fun. Again, I'm the guy with the big mouth and the guy who's going to change it anyway. And this time I was given a 3-syllable word to use anytime I had a problem, and that was Petraeus. So I knew that we needed to try to get Kyrgyz agriculture into the front door of the wing, and that would do a great deal to change our fortunes there. So, and they weren't going to be able to handle it. I was serving 15,000 meals a day to U.S. Armed Forces. And so I couldn't just convert that over. But we started small and worked our way up. And the regulation that you're talking about comes from this law called the Berry Amendment that goes back to 1921. And that the Borg, what I call the government, the Joint Interagency Task Force, called the Department of No, meaning we don't know if there's wisdom in your idea. We just know we're not going to do it. And so I made my case. I invoked the Petraeus word, my boss, and we got permission to start with a $5,000 allocation to Kyrgyz agriculture. And then you saw the truck come to the base gate with the first Kyrgyz groceries on board. Every news outlet in Central Asia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, all had cameras out the base gate to go, the Americans are changing things. Their policies are changing. Look at this. And then we furthered it. I went to our food contractor. I won't list them here because I'll get into trouble. But I basically went up to them and said, you're gonna knock off what you're doing. Look, I pay too much money already for these meals. I want these ingredients, these fresh ingredients, to be into the hands of your Kyrgyz employees. And one of the 4 food lines we have, I want them to be able to make their own recipes, their own Kyrgyz food, which is just amazing in and of itself. And this company said, we'll file agreements. No one will eat this food. No one will like Kyrgyz food. It's too different. And then we did it my way because of that word. And and then there was a line out the back of the chow hall because everybody only wanted to be on the one food line to eat this wonderful noodle dish we call besh barmak, which is 5 fingers translated, meaning you eat it with your hands, or munta, these dumplings. And you saw the impact on these Kyrgyz folks who were working for us. They were so proud that the Americans were just head over heels for their food, and they wanted to learn more, and they wanted to get more into what we were doing on our humanitarian missions there. And so through food, through agriculture, it was a whole line of effort that changed our fortunes in Kyrgyzstan.
With one incredibly logical, albeit against the policy switch, you created goodwill among the people, which is paramount, and you probably saved a lot of money.
Oh, we did. Oh, we absolutely did. Those numbers on the groceries from Kyrgyzstan just went up and up and up over time, and we took what they could handle. And it was the money was there, but much more importantly, my primary mission for President Obama and for General McChrystal, the warfighter at the time in Afghanistan, was hold this ground and triple the capacity of that wing. Well, that wasn't really commensurate with what the Chinese and the Russians wanted, which was Kyrgyzstan, evict them, do it now. And we changed the script. And I remember very clearly my immediate supervisor was a 3-star General Hostage, an incredibly gifted man, great pilot, great leader. He was in charge of all air forces for Iraq and Afghan wars. Well, he came up to visit us in the dead of winter, and he knew that I was a little bit of a different cog than his other commanders in all these combat wings around the Horn. And he just exhaustedly looked at me in the cold 14 below Fahrenheit as we're driving in to get him a cup of coffee and get him some quarters. And he said, Blain, how are you? And I said, well, I'm doing great. I just did the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. And he said, Blain, when any of my commanders says that, I'm really not even going to pay attention. But when you say that, suddenly I'm all ears. So what constitutes crazy in Blain Holt's world? This is after we've already built schools and done all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got a bazaar with all these women entrepreneurs every Saturday. And I said, well, they have a Oprah Winfrey equivalent in their TV networks here. And she's kind of connected to all this Congress of Women, these women's programs I'm trying to uplift in this country. But she's got a live TV show once a week. And so she asked me to go on her show. So I put my dress blues on and I went on her show and I spoke in Kyrgyz and I answered questions in Russian. And I brought my Kyrgyz vice commander with me. And he said, live. And I said, yes. Where was this broadcast? And I said, from Bishkek all the way to Moscow. We were in Moscow homes.
Wow.
And he said, you didn't want to ask me about this? And I said, I don't think you would have said yes. That's one thing. And he said, you're probably right. He goes, how did it go? And I said, oh, couldn't have gone better. The entire country's been writing us letters. Everybody's very excited about what they're doing. They want to participate in some of our programs with education and some of these things. And it was just one of those things where you could back off. And, you know, when you get a rush like this and you get the electricity that's running through your body, you've got a good thing and a bad thing happening. You've got the good thing of, look, man, I am running at 777 on the frequency meter and I am just kicking it. David Hawkins, come on out here and watch.
Yeah, right.
But that statement gets you to the bad thing, which is, ooh, watch out for that ego, brother. Because you are getting some endorphin hits here and your ego is waking up and going, give me more, Seymour, give me more. Mm-hmm. And so that's also a learning experience for a leader. You see the success of what you're doing and you've got to, you know, I think we talked about it earlier. After the Bible, my favorite piece of writing is the poem by Rudyard Kipling, If. And it's that part of the poem where it's, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. To me, I try to go back to that as an ego check to go, hey, watch out. That might have been a lottery ticket that went in your favor. It can go against you in 5 seconds. So just stay cool. Just stay calm. Your people need you to be calm. But inside, you're like, woohoo, take a victory lap. This is wonderful.
Yeah. Man, the sameness of bearing. I remember reading that over and over again. And just to stay centered and conscious, because anything other than that is unconscious to some degree.
That's right. That's exactly right. But I loved my year there. Even during the, you know, I had my the hard week, which was probably my most difficult week in terms of being a leader making critical life and death decisions. The massacre happened in March. The thaw started happening. The people were furious about this regime. And they had an accidental takeover of the country. The regime had death squads up on the presidential palace. As the protesters were coming through the gates, they killed 71. They wounded 2,000. And I have a real pickle on my hands. A lot of our Kyrgyz friends really put themselves at great personal risk to text me, to contact me, to make sure I had all our airmen safe and inside the base. We had already evacuated the embassy, civilians and personnel to our base. The Peace Corps volunteers were all on base, pretty airtight. But then we had to get out and start making a difference. And all those relationships paid off. We got out. We had airplanes in the air with the exact things the 5 hospitals needed as they were overwhelmed. And I brought gifts to go meet some of these very valiant people trying to take their country back. So I walk in to one of the hospital rooms, and a little boy, I thought he was a little boy. He was really just malnourished. He was actually 16 and he looked like he was 12. And he recognized me right away from TV and the media I was doing. And he said, Polkovnik Holt. Polkovnik means colonel in Russian. He said, Polkovnik Holt, Polkovnik Holt. He goes, it's you, the director of the transit center, which is what we called it in civilian terms. And he reached out for my hands, and this boy grabbed my hands and he held on tight. And then he said, and this was in Kyrgyz, and he said, I'll never wash my hands again. I've met the transit center commander. And then he said, I want to show you something. Now, he's still wearing the orange sweater that he was shot in that day. The hospitals there are not like they are in our country. It's rough. It's rough. The bowl of noodles he had next to him is nothing that you would be excited about. So he rips open his sweater and he shows me where the 7.62 round came cruising right through his clavicle, right down through his body, missed his organs, exited from his clavicle. And he is looking at that and he drops his sweater and he smiles brilliantly. And he goes, we got rid of them. They're gone now. Wow. The bad guys are gone. We're taking our country back. We're going to be fine. Now, here I am. I'm looking at this child in the 187th poorest nation on the planet, whose life is going to be altered forever because he'll never get the type of medical care he needs to be a completely functional human being again. And he is looking at me with this big smile. And he is saying brightly, we're going to be fine, with all the optimism you could find in the greatest beacon of light. And when I said my prayers that night, I said, Lord, I've taken your message. What right do I have to a bad day for the rest of my days? When I look, and every time I find myself going to my own vanities and that place where you want to be the victim and you're like, yep, this didn't go, I was wronged, I'm a victim, I'm having a bad day. I go right to that boy's face and I go, oh no, I'm okay. I'm fine. I remember those eyes completely.
Oh, that is just, I mean, I get tears in my eyes. I can see, you're such a great storyteller. I can see that boy's face, and I'm going to remember that boy's face if shit's ever hitting the fan and I'm whining about something.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
And look at what that tells you about the human spirit, just in general, what truly becomes important when you peel away all the stuff that we have at our fingertips here in the Western world, or the developed countries around the world. And you look at many of the poor nations and the people that live in these places, the smiles they carry on their face, and they have nothing. And we get so distracted by all of the things we can consume with ease. And then look at the bad days we have when our package doesn't arrive on time, or,
right.
Wow.
The cell phone's not working. Your internet's down for 5 minutes and people are screaming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I had a gentleman who knew I was building schools and giving out some desks to some schools. He drove in a semi truck for a crappy semi truck for 12 hours from no roads over this entire country, from its farthest reaches. And he showed up at the base gate. I've got to see Polkovnik Holt. And me and my Kyrgyz deputy commander, my advisor, we went out there, and he said, I heard you're giving out desks, and I hope I'm not too late. We would love to educate our children with anything like that. Could you please give me anything you have? And I thought we were near out, but I said, you know what? Let's go back to the container boxes and take a look and see if there's something still there. And I appreciate you coming out here. And so we got him a meal and we brought him on, and he was the mayor of his town. And we found a container that still had about 40 desks and chairs in it for little kids. And we put them in there and loaded up his truck. And he had tears in his eyes. And he said to me, you really, the stories we're hearing about what the transit center is doing is really great. And he said, what I want to give to you is a gift from our village. I'm going to present you with this chicken. And he gives me this fat, really healthy chicken. And you have to believe that is such a representation of wealth in a village like that. That is not a small gift. You don't say, oh, no, take it away. Oh, no, I'm not doing a live chicken today. So what I asked him was, I said, can you tell me about your village? And more specifically, can you tell me about what you would deem the poorest family in your village? What is their life like? And he said, oh, I know exactly who they are. He wasn't even thinking about what I was asking. He just said, rolled his eyes, looking up at the sky, saying, yeah, it's an Uzbek family. They're refugees. They came to us. They have 2 little kids, and they live in basically a barn that we call our community center. It's kind of open air. We try to bring them heating oil and some food when we can, but they're probably the most destitute. It's a little bit rough there. And I said, okay, so this is how I would love for you to honor me and my gift of these desks to you. I want you to take this chicken to them. And I want you to tell them that this is a gift from Polkovnik Holt at the transit center of Manas, and that we will all be praying for them. He broke down in tears, and he said, you have my word. I will bring it to them. And then we had a nice joke. I said, before they cut the neck off and eat this thing, they might want to see if it lays a few eggs first. And he laughed and said, that's a good idea. And so it's those stories. How could you not walk away from those stories? So I actually asked command to stay a little bit longer. And they said, no, you've gone native. You can go home now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You speak Kyrgyz and you built a yurt. And I'm like, okay. And they said, look, there's Lawrence of Arabia and there's Blain of Bishkek. And okay, guilty as charged. But I loved every second of my time there. Those were adventures that stressed me out to my max. And whenever I teach leadership, I'm like, I hope at some point in your life, you have to draw from every single thing you've ever learned to get to your solution. And this was an instance where that happened for me.
Wow. Okay, so now that people have a sense of who you are based on those stories and the energy that I personally feel from those stories and from you, let's get into the tougher questions regarding governmenting. Right? Because now, and we shared a lot of great stories the other night, you see very clearly both sides. The good, and this is where I want to disclose one of my scotomas, one of my blind spots, is I have become incredibly distrustworthy. I do not trust the government at all, and I actually haven't for a very long time. And I did not imagine that I would meet somebody who rose to the ranks that you've risen to, and yet talks like you would talk. And partly because I don't listen to anybody in government anyway. So maybe there are a lot more people that talk the way you talk. But please disclose or share with us where the government has went wrong. And then we'll get into what's going on today and what we do about it.
Yeah, these are great questions because you don't want to label everybody who's a government worker as somebody that you can't trust or somebody that you wouldn't. I mean, good gosh, look at all of our first responders in this nation at state, local, federal government. You've just got such selfless people out there every day. They're not the ones that you find in the headlines. So when you're an ATF person that's coming out of a helicopter and it's not really your job, but you're coming down in a coil to get a baby that was human trafficked out of a bad situation, and you're pulled back in. We're not as a nation on TV celebrating that person. We should be. Mm-hmm. However, what has overshadowed these great Americans who are serving is I can draw it up in one word for you. It's money. And so much money has come into government in the last 30 years like a tidal wave because of the way that influence is wielded in DC. Our government has grown explosively. And if you think about what that would look like in the civilian sector, we would have had the government charged with antitrust decades ago, because you build these bureaucracies and these fiefdoms that are so big, so powerful, and they're really fueled by lobbyists on K Street, special interest groups, and you get to the politics. In this case, the current politics of the day is this wokeism, this neo-Marxism that we see going across. But honestly, it could be any flavor of control, because when the government gets too big, then you look at Congress and all they start doing is printing more money to feed this beast to their rice bowls. So this does not create good behavior. Good behavior does not come out of this. And when you go back to our framers in 1775, the Sons of Liberty, which is what we modeled my little group after, the Restore Liberty group, you think about what caused them to say, this is intolerable, we're going to war. Oh my gosh. Think of what we're facing today, where we've got political prisoners in the DC jail that still have yet to be charged, and they've been there over a year. And that's not even in the line with our, I mean, it's so egregious and offensive to our Constitution. And then you look at the casino that the swamp DC has become, and you're like, they don't have representation anywhere. There's no advocacy for them. You've got a politicized DOJ, all the three-letter agencies politicized. They're more interested in going after soccer moms with their money and our money, and people who might challenge their school boards because they think gender reassignment is actually child abuse and out of bounds and not part of, their responsibility to just do reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's really gone haywire. And so you sit there and you go, how did we get here? How did this happen? Well, it happens because the money has come in like a tidal wave and the influence behind it. And then the media machine piles on top of that. And that is what now gets into, we are going to evangelize you. You want to say that this election was illegal and these voting machines were corrupt? Fine. We're going to tell you it's called the big lie. And we're going to pound you with that statement until you're so scared to speak up about it. But if you continue to speak up about it, then we'll have these voting machine guys sue you for billions of dollars, and you'll probably not have the resources to defend yourself. Well, guess what? If you don't have free and fair elections, then you don't have self-governance. And if you don't have self-governance, then you can wax romantically about your Constitution, but nobody's enforcing it for you. And we're getting to this place. And by the way, I'm an eternal optimist. I love Winston Churchill's statement, you can always trust the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. And I really honestly believe we're hurtling towards this break it point. And, I'm the type of person that if you feel like you're heading towards a car accident, oh God, step on the gas. Let's get there quickly so we can. And that's where the country is right now. I think what I see happening in the nation right now with all of these egregious things over the past couple of years, it's not a Republican versus Democrat world anymore. It's much more. I mean, the media would love to pit us against each other in this little rat maze called red versus blue. But what I'm finding in my travels is it's much more about we the people versus global elites and U.S. versions of those global elites. And that's really where the true battle lines are. It's just that those elite folks with their money and power have hijacked our government. And this is where you get bad behavior like 87,000 IRS agents. This is where you get wars that lead to nowhere with no strategies on them. This is where you get endless money printing to take away our wealth through inflation. This is how these things come about. And now we have a nation waking up. Well, how do we get it back? We want our nation back. And, this is our call to activism. This is our call to melt the switchboards and hold accountable who works for you in Congress. This is the time to get to know your sheriff and what all their constitutional powers are. This is the time to, in the lineup of reading your Bible, in the lineup of reading good works, like we talked about David Hawkins' work or Rudyard Kipling, it's time to add your Constitution to this. It's time to understand your rights. It's time to understand what the framers meant. And it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. The Constitution was actually written for the Democrats as well. Although George Washington didn't agree that he said we shouldn't even have political parties. Man, that was brilliant. But it's a rat maze and they've pitted one against the other. And meanwhile, their crimes go untried and their bad behavior and using our money to do it is not really held to account. I am hopeful that a certain amount of governors in the nation will start to come together and establish a constitutional sanctuary where this federal overreach is going to be checked because the federal government is in breach of its contractual obligations with the Constitution. They're not providing the security to the states. Look at the balloons. They've got a wide open border. So Article 4, Section 4 is in breach. The budget really doesn't get handled or written by the Congress. That's Article 1, Section 8. Free and fair elections are starting to get a little queasy. I'm not sure that we could absolutely say we've got verifiable, fair elections. That's Article 2, Section 2. So if that's the case, then the Interstate Commerce Clause, the Supremacy Clause, are in a place where they should be held at pause. I'm not suggesting anybody secedes from the Union, but I would say that, until you want to come into alignment with the Constitution and your obligations, then the 10th Amendment, which is state sovereignty, will trump what you all in DC are doing. And if you get enough states together, like 32 of them, then you're talking Article 5 invocation and a convention of states, and then we'll tell them what the amendments are. And isn't that what the framers intended all along? Is we are Americans, we are inherently free, and we have self-governance. And if the Mitch McConnells and the Schumers of the world don't agree with that, but they're really enamored with the checks they get from big pharma, big food, big everything, well, then we should displace them, and we should start to take back our power. It is that time in our nation's history to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it sure is. And let's go ahead, Matthew.
So lobbying, that to me, from my little bit of political experience, seems to be one of the worst things to happen to both your country, my country. I'm in Canada, because that lobbying power has really been completely unchecked, has really corrupted many at the highest levels of government today. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, Matt, you've got it exactly right. And what happens is, so what did we go to war over in 1776? We said taxation without representation won't stand. So now let's say that I was going to run for the U.S. Congress seat here in my little old district in Idaho. The very first time out of the gate, I'm going to have to go attract money from the local grassroots to say, send me to Congress. Let's get rid of this guy. And then I'm going in. And then what happens is you're faced with this dilemma of massive money running against you. And you got to run every 2 years in this hamster mill. Well, K Street, the lobbying companies, they come in and they make it really easy for you. Hey, you don't have to raise money anymore. You don't have to worry about any of that. We got your back. We'll set up a PAC for you. We're going to do this. We're going to wine and dine you here. And they don't do this because they're concerned citizens. They do this because they expect behavior for what they do for you. But it gets worse. Then there's the internal lobbying in the Congress or in the Canadian Parliament, same thing, which means if you're in this party, you're going to do just exactly what we tell you. So your vote is no longer your own. If Kevin McCarthy wants to whip votes and you too many times vote against Kevin McCarthy, you're going to be marked, and then they'll go find somebody in your district to primary you because you won't play ball. Mm-hmm. But then tell me where the good people of this district get represented if those two competing interests obviate. Then it's, well, why did we send anybody there in the first place if we're not represented there? And so what's got to happen is we have to have term limits in this nation. I remember when the McCain-Feingold, act came out and they tried to clean up money in politics. I thought it was bringing a squirt gun to a fire, quite honestly. And so then they got rid of it because of freedom of speech concerns. My idea is degas it on the other side. So if we could get the term limits in, not just for the representatives and the elected, but for their staffers as well. Meaning, you want to be a congressional staffer? Fine. That's like a specialty tour in your government career. You can't do it all the time. You can't be entrenched all the time. Because then what you do is K Street looks at itself and says, do we really have an active business model here if we can't go buy a politician for 40 years at a time? Then they don't. Now it's more of a fair fight between we the people and the swamp. And I think that if the framers in the Federalist Papers were to write Federalist 68 would have been term limits. I think if we could bring them back as ghosts, they would go, man, did we mess that one up? We missed that, guys. Sorry.
Yeah. And now we know. Oh gosh. So, Kissinger, you've actually sat with Kissinger. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. I've worked with him. I met him once and then worked with him on a diplomatic panel that involved the Chinese.
Okay. He's one of I quote him quite often not from because I like the guy perspective either. When he said, if you want to control people, control food. How have you seen that play out? Because that's not just the ramblings of a madman. That's the strategy of a man who has met with every U.S. president.
It is. And this is the place where when things get too hard to understand, or when people like that, of that stature and with that type of reputation, say things like, there is clearly overpopulation in this world. We have to control money. We have to control food. We go to Davos. We want to control the world. They say all these things openly. They post these things on their websites. But when there's like this cognitive dissonance with the public, where the public says, okay, none of that makes sense to me. That's tinfoil hat stuff. But then most of the public won't go read what they actually wrote in their own words. And then it's like, this is going to get dangerous if you keep this up, because these people have billions of dollars and they actually are really not interested in your country, your sovereignty, your constitution, your cute little freedoms. You're just in the way. And so control the food is an obvious one. And I see in the last 3 to 4 years, they're aggressively working that now. They are aggressively working that part. They do wake up every morning going, 8 billion people is too many on the planet. And I just find that ludicrous. As somebody who's flown around this planet a million times, exaggeration, you can see there's probably room for even a few more. But most of the demographic counts will tell you that we are pretty much peak population right now. And for very good reason, we would expect declining birth rates globally. George Friedman wrote a great book on this, and it was the most responsible analytics on demographics that I have found. But okay, they're convinced that the carbon exchange and emissions will kill us, and that there's too many people. And now they're putting their money where their mouth is. So initiatives out of the World Economic Forum at Davos, this is not conjecture, this is exactly what has happened there, have been championed by world leaders like Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of Netherlands, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Prime Minister of Ireland, where they're actually, no kidding, out of their concern for carbon emissions from nitrates and fertilizers, looking at repossessing people's farms, taking them and converting them into high density housing for these migrants that they pushed all over the planet and exploited. But this war on fertilizer, this war on grains, look at the Ukraine-Russian war. This takes out almost a third of the grains available on our planet, which, by the way, is abundant for food. And then precariously, we see terrorism, whether it's inspired by the World Economic Forum or not. But anybody who wants to tell me that it's just dumb luck that 125 food processing facilities in the last 18 months have been burned to the ground or damaged or stopped, and cattle culled, and millions and millions of chickens destroyed because of somebody's interpretation of avian flu, I'm just not a buyer. It looks very, very clear to me that these globalist visions and dreams that were, the cute musings of evil globalists in the 70s are now coming to reality. And we have to take a stake against this. We have to stop this. And this is where, Jim, I find your vision on permaculture and local communities going for their own resilience and rebuffing them, saying, you guys might even still make food, but we're not going to have mRNA in our food because we saw what it did for the vaccinations. So, we'll be fine on our own. We don't need you, and we're going to not have you. That'll attract attention in a negative way. But I think if communities across America rise up and go, no, we insist that that's what we want, well, then I think we're going to see that happen.
That's the key. And so, turn the problem into the solution. The one thing about this overpopulation lie is the fact that the same people who are saying we're overpopulated are the ones who produce the poisons that are actually destroying our world.
Right.
And if we simply used our resources in a cyclical, regenerative manner, there's literally no amount of people that it could be 20 billion, as long as we steward nature, we respect nature, we respect natural pathways, migratory movements, and we respect the soil and take the poisons out. So it seems like good versus evil is somehow the overarching spiritual thing going on here. These people like Kissinger, they're just they're just controlled by ignorance and evil, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think they're just controlled by this lust for world domination, and that they abhor our liberties, because God forbid that they would ever face competition one day for their wealth and their empires from just these free range Americans that run around thinking up stuff and inventing stuff and going after new things. But when you take a look at some of their solutions that they virtue signal all over the world, they don't even add up for what they say. So we need good, clean energy of tomorrow. Well, okay, let's review their good, clean energy. Windmills are falling apart and destroying birds and sea life. If you want to throw away an array of solar panels after it's done, you will be putting toxins into the ground that will be there for hundreds of years. If you believe that electric vehicles are not coal-fired, you need to go ahead and check yourself and do some education. If you think that the lithium is virtuous in those things, go ahead and try to throw away an electric car and find out what that hazardous materials charge is going to be, or on the front end where the child slave labor in Africa is exploited to get you that lithium and cobalt. Every single thing that they do, or putting things and toxins and GMOs into our food sources, our water supply, everything they do is the opposite of what they're saying.
Yes.
And it's honestly, this is too much power being wielded at free people. And now we're at a time where we're coming to this intersection of, we'll either tolerate it and we're going to lose millions of people as a result, or we're going to check them and say, we're on to you. Saw your new food pyramid. We're not buyers on this. Actually, as it turns out, a shank of lamb is much more healthy than Captain Crunch, but that's not what the FDA says today. And so this is an electric time. I think it's a wonderful time to be alive, because I'm looking at all kinds of people and why we don't have billions of dollars. Woo, never underestimate a pile of angry villagers. I know that George III and the British sure did back in 1775.
Well, go watch an episode of The Simpsons, right?
Yeah, that's right. Or South Park.
So let's just for a second take it from the position of there's too many people in the world. Now, I'm wondering, are they saying this because if everybody consumed at the rate which we consume here in Canada and the United States, with such a demand for stuff at ease, is that why we would have too many people, right? If everybody, all 7.5 billion of us, consumed at the rate that we do in such excess and such waste, now do we have an issue?
Yep. So Matt, you're getting at a great piece. This is awesome. This is where freedom takes over and does the right thing, right? Yeah. So unchecked capitalism, unchecked consumerism. If we had a United States and Canada times 187 nations, look at what would happen. It wouldn't be ruination. What it would be is, oh, I see there's a competition for resources and scarcity. So what does that do? That spawns innovation. Yes. So, reasonable people aren't for doing things that are against the planet. You'll find that I'm a poster child for hydrogen power, because there's just so many ways to harness it and use it. And it actually does do responsible things in our environment. And nobody's saying that we shouldn't have sustainable solutions. It's just that they've hijacked that word sustainable as their ESG, altar that they worship at, which is the land of bad solutions that just gives us scarcity and them wealth. And now everybody's okay. But in a free world, when you find there's scarcity, then let's look at the Middle East, or let's look at the African coast, the sub-Saharan African coast. There's water problems. Okay, I got it. There's other ways than power-hungry desalination plants to create water. There's thermal ways. There's lots of different technologies coming online that, with the investment capital flowing in those directions rather than these nonsensical ideas, you would solve a major problem. You would create an abundance. What I believe is that the WEF kids at Davos, when they see you put together something that could, I don't know, make the African continent prosperous, able to multiply, able to be abundant, they're terrified of that. They're absolutely terrified of that. They're well, we can't have that because then there'd be less for us. And it's like, your Gulfstream 800 jets and your Chateaubriand on the weekends are going to be fine. But where you're going to get yourself into trouble is when you go tell Johnny, I like my prime rib on Saturdays, that you're going to eat bugs. We're just not going to buy into that. We're never going to buy into it. And you're not going to inject my cattle with stuff. And then this idea behind what Bill Gates, his impossible meat. Yes, it's impossible to eat because as it turns out, if you're a male and you go on soybeans for too long, you're never going to have a kid, and you're going to change yourself around and put these hormones into your body that nobody had. And yet they're using their media machine to evangelize us on this. What I believe, and I've traveled to 135 countries, and I have seen the poorest of the poor. They are being held down and held back in the most sinister and evil of ways. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this way. What we can do is be that shining city on the hill. We don't have to go intervene and give Afghanistan a Jeffersonian democracy. We can become the example for freedom-loving peoples to rise up and to say, I see it. We got this. We don't need to see fighter jets over our country, but we do need to insist to our own country that we're not putting up with this anymore. Yeah. And I think there's this awakening. We talked about it at the start of this podcast. There's this collective consciousness, this energy that's rising. People understand what's wrong, but now they're having to kind of come to grips with, well, even Joe Biden said, you want to come at us, you need to have F-15s. It's like, listen, we're not going to do it with F-15s. We understand you've got the market cornered on that. But what we will do is we will use the resilience in our communities, use our innovation and our creativity to just make you irrelevant and go around.
Yes.
And if we have to use the Constitution to do it via Article 5, well, we'll do that too. Just go ahead and get us mad enough and you watch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's so many things and layers to unpack. And, we're talking about a strategy too that Lieutenant Colonel Chambers is involved and yourself. And we're going to bring together organizers, people who have spent their lives at the highest level, learning how to organize and motivate groups of people to do things. Infinitely more powerful than fear. Fear radically changed the world in 3 months, quite frankly. Right? When we can take a spotlight and organize a group of people and call out these world leaders. And this is what I'm so excited about. This just came to me, and I called you, General Holt, right after this, 4:30 in the morning yesterday. And I sent you a message. And when we invite, encourage, and compel these world leaders by name, and have this go out to billions of people, this message, which we are absolutely, it's in the works. It's absolutely going to happen. We invite them by saying, here's a solution where you could be loved and revered by your country because you're actually doing good. You're putting food for us, a fraction of the budget. 1 week's military budget could feed the whole United States for in perpetuity.
Right.
It might be 1 day's worth. I don't.
It's not being spent on balloons. I can promise you that.
Right. So anyway, we're so excited to be collaborating with you. And my idea, the problem into the solution. This idea in my head that the government was only a problem, when we can actually inspire the people who are wonderful, courageous, faithful, and aware people within the government system to start using the resources of the people to do good. Boom, we'll change the world like that.
Absolutely, we will. We will. It's inevitable. Their days are numbered, and people are catching on all over the place. And the nice part is their plans that, if you just look at what the World Economic Forum has done through the central banks, it's illicit relationships with China and Russia, even though the theater is supposed to show us that these are different things. Their plans are way too complicated. And I can just tell you that from a military strategist. So many things have to work out for them. And, they never have accounted for the second and third order effects of their actions. And what they're doing is they're waking up, millions of people. China's killing millions of its people every day. The COVID numbers that are not being reported from China I think at the end of the day, the China death count will make the Cultural Revolution look like a mild incursion.
Wow.
We're talking millions and millions of people since COVID started, and I think the Chinese people are getting close to saying no. I think that it's very, very difficult for a civilian population to look at a police state and saying, we're taking over, we're not going to have this anymore. But look at Tahir Square. What would ever cause someone in Mubarak's Egypt, where he had surveillance and thugs on every corner ready to decapitate or club the knees of anybody who got out of line, what would cause thousands to come right out into Tahir Square? I'll tell you what it would be. It's looking into the eyes of your dying child because they can't eat. There's nothing for them to eat. And saying, I have nothing to lose. I'm going out there. And I think that people are watching their wealth dry up. They're watching the things that they've worked for dry up. They're watching their friends and family get hurt. They're watching families pitted against each other. And they're looking at things that don't look at these train derailments. We're supposed to believe these are isolated things. It's just nonsense. We don't believe it anymore. We don't buy what we're being told anymore. And so just like 1984 with George Orwell, if you turn off the newspeak, turns out we're waking up. Now we understand what's going on. That's happening. Mm-hmm. And they ought to be nervous because they didn't plan on this. It's not going their way, which I always want to be on the side of the good guys. And we're on the side of the good guys.
Yes. I think they can tell it's not going their way. It's why they had 5,000 additional military troops and officers deployed in Davos this year for the World Economic Forum meeting.
Oh, yeah. That's their defensive posture. And please do not use your truck except to go on little 15-minute trips starting next year in Oxford, England. But do understand that because I breathe the rarefied air, I must take my Gulfstream 800 jet around the world to speak at these forums with my good friend Greta Thunberg to lecture the rest of you, unwashed masses. And the unwashed are starting to go, I think this has to stop now. Yeah. And it's happening all over the world.
Yeah, it's happening all over the world. And here's what else is happening all over the world. We're putting out Freedom Farm Academies, and RestoreLiberty.org is part of this, right? Because it's all the same thing. Yep. Food, sovereignty, and freedom are literally go hand in hand.
Their birthright.
So where can people find your work, and how do we shine a light on what you're doing?
Oh, I appreciate that. So, and I appreciate Matt putting up our website. It's restore-liberty.org. And you'll find that we're committed to a lot of the things we've been talking about here on this podcast. The other place is I am a Newsmax contributor, a proud one at that. And I'm usually on every single morning or in their shows during the days to talk about these things. But I also have on their website my own blog space. I write once or twice a week. It's called The Irascible Disruptor. And you can find me there and subscribe to my work. And like I said, I'm all in on creativity and doing the right thing. But in this new war, I'm going to be a joyful airman, and I'm going to do my work and do everything we can to raise the collective awareness and energy on this stuff. And then let the evil ones be damned.
Thank you, sir. It's such a pleasure to know you.
Yeah, for me as well. It's great to be with you both.
All right. Well, folks, if you like this show, please send it to everybody you know. Let's now invite all of the people in the government and different entities to be part of this revolution. And we're changing the world, my friends. Ciao.
Okay. Everybody have an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us on the Jim Gale Show.
All right.
I'll let you guys, it's still live, so I can let you guys hop out. And I can
I'll hop out. We've got a Freedom Farm Academy meeting right now. So next time we'll have you on, we'll have it be, we're going to schedule an hour and a half if you're available.
Oh, yeah. Sounds good. Consider me a regular. I love it here.
Love it. More to come. Let's change your
Take
world.
care. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope everybody enjoyed the show today. We'll just quickly pay an ad from our sponsors.
At Weston A. Price Foundation, we're dedicated to restoring nutrient-dense, farm-fresh foods to the human diet. We look to ancient food and health practices for clues on how to live our healthiest, most vibrant lives today. Join the mission and check out our exclusive membership details at westonaprice.org. As a member, you'll receive our quarterly journal on wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts, our annual shopping guide, monthly access to private Q&A sessions with experts, consultations on state laws, regulations, and policies, including food freedom legislation, and so much more. Weston A. Price Foundation. Let's return to wise, traditional foods.
Hey, Jim Gale Show listeners, again, thank you for tuning in. We love having you here. We're so honored. And, I want to give you a little bit of exciting news. We've decided to offer complimentary food forest strategy sessions with a certified permaculture designer. These are 30-minute sessions where you get to sit down with someone who can really help you with a strategy for your own property. It's a great chance for you to ask some questions and learn and just really to dig into what's possible. This is 30 minutes with someone who's certified, knows all about permaculture and what's possible using this incredible science and working with nature. So head over to foodforestabundance.com and schedule your 30-minute food forest strategy session today. Again, that's foodforestabundance.com. And remember, get yourself registered for that 30-minute strategy session. And for doing so, we're going to give you a $100 coupon as well. So get over there, have some fun, learn about what's possible for you and your own property, and let's get growing some food. Thanks again for tuning in to the Jim Gale Show.